What is up, everyone? Welcome to an extraordinarily delayed opening to College Kickoff Eve. This is what happens when we do this show on Wednesdays and not on Fridays. All of the technology breaks, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a good time. So a lot of patience and thank you to everybody who has been in the stream for the last, 5 minutes and 16 seconds while I fumble my way through in the least professional way possible. We have Jackson State and Middle Tennessee State on right now as we speak. And Coach, welcome to the feed, my man.
Iceman, hey buddy, I was telling everyone, all three people that were watching, that we have done okay. Right, this is what the sixth week we've done this,
Yes.
7,
Yes, 6.
whatever, and this is the first time, right, that we've had any issues.
That is not true, because do you remember week 2, I came in on mute and tried to introduce everybody to the show?
Sure, but that's like minor. That's just like par for the course. That's going to happen. And that's just really the product of us trying to hit the mute button to not pick up background noise and me slamming my beer on the table or my chair creaking. And we're just trying to make it clean up the sound as much as possible. So that's going to happen sometimes where we maybe don't get off the mute button in time. But hey, interesting fact. I saw this graphic today, and I'm going to botch the numbers, which is fine. That's on brand.
Please do, because that's on brand for yes.
It was something like 53 of the next 54 days or something like that. It was like 53 of 54 or 54 of 55 of the next 54 of the next 55 days. There's football on television.
There is.
It's incredible, man. Like, and we talked about this all freaking summer, and here we are.
Yes, and right now there is a player down. There are paramedics that look like they're attending to this kid at Middle Tennessee State right now. I don't know on whose side, but both sidelines are on the field looking at this. So hopefully that situation is not as dire as it looks from over here. And football is a tough sport, man. Like it's violent, and we see injuries all the time, and we see things like this happen more and more often. So I just hope that this kid is okay and that everything can go back to normal for him and he's not paralyzed or something like that, because you kind of always fear the worst in that. So yes, football is here. We have no days off from football. I guess it depends on what you consider football. Some people will not watch a game like this because it's not their brand of football, or it's two schools they don't know. But we're not at a shortage of sports right now, because in a couple weeks, we're going to have the NBA on, the NHL will be on, the baseball playoffs are happening right now as we speak, and of course, college and the NFL. So there's a lot of sports to be had, and it's a great time in sports. It's probably the best time.
There's a lot of times that I consider best times, right? I think that we're kind of on the cusp of that right here with, we're going to have a lot of the major sports going on all at the same time.
Yes.
A good mixture of postseason, start of the season, middle of the season for college football. We're going to get the beginning of college basketball before football season's over. And so there's just tons of excitement. And then come, like, as I always say, right around March is a really exciting time of year too, because March Madness, NCAA wrestling tournament, baseball is getting ready to fire up, spring training. So there's tons of stuff to be excited about. And you mentioned, we got the baseball playoffs. Another number I saw was that the Rays apparently at their first round game, there was like 19,000 people there. That's insane. Like, why would you build a new stadium? They want a new stadium, which I get. Apparently the Trop is a dump, right? But if you can't get 19,000 people to show up for a playoff game, a playoff baseball game, then why would you entertain the idea of building a new stadium unless you think the stadium is the reason people aren't coming?
Because you can sucker the taxpayers into paying for it. That's really all that it comes down to. And I think that if the ownership of a baseball club, a football club, or whoever can get publicly funded money for a stadium, they'll stay wherever they have to make it work. And that's why the Commanders were looking at Virginia. They're looking at Maryland. They don't care. Wherever it's cheapest and wherever they can get the least burden on themselves financially. So if they want to stay in Tampa, fine. But I still think it's a Florida problem. I mean, right now I just switched it to the Marlins, and the Marlins, even though they're a playoff team, have major attendance problems, and it doesn't matter.
Are there any Miami sports that do well? Did the Heat do well?
Yes, the Heat do well. Yep, the Heat do pretty well.
I think the Dolphins probably do okay.
Yes, but not really, because they haven't had much of a product to put on. At least for the Heat, they've had LeBron and Dwayne Wade, and they've won championships. So they have some pedigree of being consistent. I mean, they were in the NBA Finals last year and in the bubble in 2020. So they have something, and the Marlins haven't done anything. So I get why people aren't going to go watch them. It's like any sport, man. If your team is not good, most of the time people aren't going to show up. And even we see that in college when programs fall off towards the end of the season, the games that are basically meaningless, you don't see a lot of fans there.
Sure. No, you're right.
And
Well, what's crazy though too is like Miami football, the U. They're pretty good right now, right? They're maybe on the cusp of getting on a roll and starting something. Mario Cristobal, I think, is the right guy for the job. He's an
yes,
alum, and they
Cuban
still,
descent, that
man,
helps.
they can't fill the stands, and it's very interesting. And I think part of it is with
Well, there,
attendance in all sports is the internet, right? Because you don't have to go. You can watch every game. You can find every game online, basically.
yes.
And I mean, of course, the major programs, which Miami is a major program. That's the anomaly, I
I
guess. But
think Miami used to be a major program in the way that you're thinking about
they're a
it. Like,
major brand.
are they though?
I think so.
That's an
I mean,
interesting question to
the
ponder.
U is like
Home run.
synonymous with just I don't know the U. It's a brand. I feel like it's a
Yeah.
brand, even like the Oakland Raiders, the Raiders. Like it's a brand. Like
Yes.
even though no, regardless of their level of success.
Speaking of fans that show out no matter what, JT Realmuto just hit a 2-run home run. The Phillies are up 2-0 now, and that stadium is electric. So, speaking of fan bases or teams, we like to adopt a team every now and again. And, Coach, over the weekend, you asked me to add a team to the college roll call because you feel like this is a team that we need to adopt. And I can't say that I am against it. So, of course, we are going to not have the slides up here because I forgot that I restarted my browser. So, why don't we go ahead and add them here? So, we have decided to add the Colorado Buffaloes because we just love everything that they're about. They don't have to be winners, they don't have to win a national championship, but we like what Coach Prime is doing there. And so, we are now up to, let me count, 7 schools. And that's amazing. It's the U, it's a rep. Thank you. Rick knows exactly what I'm talking about. Catholics versus convicts, and it was not the Catholic part. I see our resident recruit for the University of Alabama is in the feed tonight, so welcome to J-Dog. And speaking of recruits, we're going to have one up here a little bit later on in this feed, and I'm going to tell you right now, sort of an announcement, is that our recruit James is going to make a weekly pick every single time we are on here. So he will be making a pick for the Red River Showdown, and that is going to be a great pick. So we will have him up here in a little bit. Okay. So week 5 was last week, and Notre Dame continued on their run of just squeaking out victories and hard schedules, but we never really got to your experience in South Bend. And I wanted you to be able to have a little bit of runway to talk about that. And then we can go into the game, which I know you were not stressed out in the least while watching.
Yeah, so that was definitely a nail biter, and we'll get into that in a minute. No, yeah, my experience in South Bend was great. My dad and I have been fortunate enough to go the last 3 consecutive years to a game, and it's just become like, first of all, the campus of Notre Dame is beautiful, and I mean, it's the architecture is in such a way, and it sounds like Virginia Tech is similar, where all the buildings look the same. They look almost this medieval limestoney look. I mean, everything just kind of blends in. It's just a really cool place, and obviously the tradition. And I'm not like, the interesting thing is I'm not Catholic, right? I'm not an overly religious person either, and so obviously that stuff. I mean, I respect it, and but it's not like I don't get consumed, I guess, in that piece of it. I'm a Notre Dame fan despite that, I guess. But anyhow, anytime we go to South Bend and go to a Notre Dame game, it's really like, as weird as it is, I mean, it's kind of an emotional experience, right? Because you grow up like looking forward to going to do that. My dad and I always talked about it, and the fact that it's become reality now 5, 6 times or whatever it is, spread out over time has been really cool. And it's kind of, I always get caught up in all of it, man. Like the national anthem, the fight song, just the shipping up to Boston, the whole bit is really great. And it's like, I'm hopeful that we're trying to plan coming up in November. I think it's senior day for Notre Dame. They're hosting Wake Forest. So it'll be like a Sam Hartman. I don't like to call it a revenge game because
Oh,
he
yeah,
didn't
it
leave there
is.
on, he didn't leave there on bad terms.
But you remember the media now. This is how you have to sell it.
Sure. And but I'm hopeful that we're planning on me, my dad, the wife, and our oldest, our daughter, who's 7. We're planning on the 4 of us trying to go up there and catch that game. So it'd be really. I'm looking forward to sharing like that experience with my wife and our daughter and stuff. I think that you know she sees it on TV. They hear us talk about it all the time, and so I don't know. I find in my old age like I get kind of like emotionally wrapped up in this stuff, like, and not even from a fan perspective. It's just like I really value the experience
Oh yeah.
of being able to be there and being able to be there with people that I care about and that are important to me. And it's a neat thing. And this time I took a few pictures and videos like right at the beginning,
Hmm.
as far as like the national anthem and stuff like that. But then I put my phone away because I'm like,
Oh
you know what,
yeah.
like I just want to take this in, and so that was really neat.
I'm the
But
same
anyway,
way at
go ahead.
concerts too. No, I'm the
Yeah.
same way at concerts and stuff like that. Like I'll allow myself a little bit, but other than that, okay. So hold on to
Yes.
your emotional diatribe and your trip down memory lane. Our recruit is here. Welcome, James. Can you put these over?
All right.
Okay, great. Okay, can you please put them on the table?
We got Big James.
Yes, we got Big
Probably
James
a
here.
little past his bedtime tonight, staying up late with the boys.
And here he is, looking good, looking good. Okay,
Good.
all right. Yep.
Fresh out of the bath,
He
probably.
knows. See this? Look at this. Look at this. Okay,
James.
my man.
What's up, James?
Okay. All right. How you doing, buddy? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Can you say hi to everybody?
Hi,
Who's-
everybody.
Excellent. And what is your name?
James.
Yes, very good. Okay, James, are you ready to pick a game for everybody watching and for Coach Brad? Okay. All right. I need you to say two words for me. Can you say Texas
Texas.
and Oklahoma?
Oklahoma.
Okay. I'm only going to ask you this once, so make sure you tell me which one you really want, okay?
I think Oklahoma.
Oh,
Okay.
he's jumping the gun. Look at him. I
All
like
right,
it.
So say it again.
Oklahoma.
Oh, man.
Can you
Sorry.
say boomer sooner?
Yes.
Boomer
Bo-
sooner.
Boomer Suma.
Oh,
All right.
okay. All right. So we're going to write this down. This is becoming a thing. James unfortunately went 1-1 in his picks last week as Oregon State upset the Utah Utes. However, he did sneak in, he did fade and sort of parlay or whatever you want to call it, hedges his bets, and he picked Alabama to win, and Alabama won handily. Okay. So are you sure you're going to pick Oklahoma to beat Texas? Okay, you heard it here first. James, thank you so much for coming up here. You are a wonderful guest as always. Do you have anything you'd like to say to everybody before you leave?
Daddy, I need to take this to oh no.
Yeah, that's a good way to, yes, that's a good way to end the feed. Say good night. Hey, say good night to everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Good
All right.
night, James.
Excellent. Excellent work by you. Yep, I know. Okay, can you take off the
So
wheel
great.
somewhere else,
That's
my
a
man?
Great.
You know what? That's fine. Who cares? All right.
It's a great thing.
So-
I'm happy we do this.
I agree. So continue talking about, so obviously this right here tells everybody who's watching that I also appreciate the experiences like you just
Sure.
talked about with your
Yeah.
family and stuff. And while maybe right now this face doesn't understand what's going doesn't understand what's going on, I think at the end of the day, it's still fun for me. And so I'm very, very happy to be able to do it. So are you ready to go see mommy, please?
Yeah, so the game, just the whole experience really cool. As I've gotten older, I just make a point to take it in as much as possible and enjoy the environment, the experience, and the game, right? That's why you're there, and like really try to pay attention to the game and you know, um kind of enjoy the whole process, which is great. So moving on to this most recent game with Notre Dame
Yes.
and Duke, like I think we talked about it a little bit last week. We knew this was going to be a difficult game going on the road. This is the biggest home game that Duke's played in a long time. I mean, that's not any disrespect to Clemson. That was a really big game, but Clemson sort of faltered a little bit. So I think this was a huge game for Duke. And when you look at this game going in, we knew Duke was going to have a great defense, and their defense showed up. Both defenses showed up, really. And Notre Dame held them to their least amount of points scored, and they scored more points on them than anyone else had scored all year, even though it was only, what was it?
21-14.
21-14. And so they hadn't given up more than 14, I don't think, at all during the season. So, the thing is, though, what's crazy about it is Notre Dame did not play that well on offense. Now, part of
No.
that's because of how good Duke's defense is, and I want to make sure that we give credit where credit's due. in that sense. But it's nice to be able to go on the road into a tough environment against a good football team and not play your A game and still come out with a win. And that's what they did. And I was happy to see that. I do think, this is probably the first game where I've been a little bit and I hesitate to be too critical of coaches because I know that I don't know the ins and outs of what's happening there. I don't see practice, but I wasn't crazy about the play calling on offense. I thought that there was at one point in time during the game, I was like calling out to my dad, like what play they were going to run because it had become so predictable at that point. It's like first down, handoff up the middle to Audric Estime, like every time on first down. Like everybody in America knew that's what was coming, and they were getting stuffed every time too. It's not like they were having. It's one thing if people know what you're running and you're having success with it, but they were getting stuffed every single time, and that puts them in second and long, and now you're forced to be a little bit more aggressive to get into a third and manageable, and there's so many different things. But I tell you what was really cool is Sam Hartman really showed out. Like that dude took the game into his hands on that final drive and really showed some guts on the first down run on that 4th and 16.
Oh my goodness.
Especially after what we saw against Ohio State, where he came up short a couple times in those situations. So that was really awesome to see. And then, like, come on, man, like total first class guy. And right after the game, like one of the first things out of his mouth that he thinks is he compliments his defense, compliments his teammates, and then says, I got to go see how Riley Leonard is.
Yeah.
And goes and waits outside the tent to make sure
brutal, by the way,
that he's okay. Yeah. And that's one thing that stinks. I haven't heard what his prognosis is. If he's out for a bit or if he's, I haven't followed up, but in the event that he is out for a while, that stinks because Duke's going to struggle.
Yep.
And which is going to almost devalue the win a little bit, right? Because if they struggle from here on out without Riley Leonard, it's like, well, you beat a 500 Duke team. Well, that's a different team that played the rest of the season after that game if he is out.
The people that are going to say that, though, are the people that don't really know what they're talking about. Like, they didn't watch this game. And I think that sometimes whenever we get into ranking season, and I'm talking about for the playoff, a lot of people try to either go back in time and say, well, that didn't look very good. Good night, buddy. I love you, dude.
No, and you're right. They
Anyway.
either overvalue, they try to look back and overvalue wins,
Yes,
or overvalue losses, in some way, shape, or form.
I think that when it comes to these things, you have to look at what was the team that they played at the time. And Duke at the time was at full strength. And if you're talking about whether the Notre Dame gets into the playoff or not based off of the fact that Duke ends up going 500 from here on out because their star player is out, to me, that's not good analysis. Like, you're not giving Notre Dame enough credit for beating the team in the moment. Now, if they play Duke without their star quarterback and beat them, Duke is a school, dude. Man, this is chaos up here. We got James up here. Winston is roaming around. I mean, it's just like a circle around here. And the best part is the camera catches none of it because they're just walking around over here. Anyway, I think that it would be different, right? And anytime that happens, you need to take into account the circumstances for which that game was played. And even Notre Dame's loss to Ohio State last week or 2 weeks ago, it's like, if they had one extra guy on defense on that last play, they may win the game, right? Because maybe they're able to stop that run. They don't score the touchdown. So you take that into consideration in looking at the analysis of what did that loss really mean. If Ohio State ends up going undefeated from here on out, then, you know what I'm saying? Like, my point is you have to take a look at exactly what's happening in the moment. And I think to your dad's point, yes, they're missing their best offensive lineman, but the quarterback also matters a lot too. And so I think
Notre Dame was also missing two starting receivers, 2 or 3 starting receivers, 2 for sure. So I mean, at this point in time in the year, everybody's banged up. They're going to be missing a guy or two. I mean, obviously every team has those 1 or 2 like critical guys that really make a huge difference. Like if Notre Dame was without Sam Hartman,
yes,
they would be in the same boat as Duke, right? I mean, they would really struggle to win this upcoming game against Louisville. They would struggle against Clemson. They would struggle against USC. I mean, there's 3 or 4 games still left on the schedule that would be difficult games to win without your star player.
Yes, and the same goes for the next school, which is Colorado. They've been out without Travis Hunter for how many weeks now? I think this is the third week in a row, or at least the second week that he has been out fully. And the result of them losing to USC isn't surprising. The fact that they had this raucous comeback in the second half and USC's defense can't seem to stop a nosebleed, to me, this result is more indicative of USC going forward as a true playoff contender and a national championship contender than it is where Colorado is. I think the fact that Colorado came back was showing a lot of resilience. But when you talk about these wins and losses, like when we go back and look at USC beating Colorado in 7 weeks, will that surprise anybody? No, of course it doesn't surprise anybody. But I think that when you look at that game in a vacuum, Caleb Williams was awesome. Don't get me wrong. But also USC's defense was trash in the second half. And they're going to need to be better if they want to stack up against these other teams. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, so we got this is Dave, right?
Yes, it is Dave.
Correct. Yeah. Hi, Dave. Hey, Dave, first of all, thank you for filling in last week, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. No, for real. No, I want to say, so in terms of like what you mentioned here, Michigan versus Wake Forest. Wake Forest is part of the ACC. Notre Dame has a deal with the ACC. They have to play 5 or 6 ACC teams a year. They don't get to choose who they are. They get who they get. So, this year, obviously Clemson's in that mix. Next year, Florida State's on the schedule. Miami was supposed to be on the schedule next year, but something happened where there was a weird scheduling conflict, and so now Miami is removed off next year's schedule. So who that gets replaced with, I guess, to be determined. Maybe we'll luck out and it'll be Virginia Tech. That'd be cool. Because otherwise, I think we got to wait till 2027 or something. But no, I wish they'd play Michigan still. They seem like they always played Michigan every year. I don't know why they took them off the schedule, and I don't even know if you're still here, Dave. But I wish they played Michigan still. I wish they played Michigan State. Those are some good geographical rivalries. In my opinion, I'd like to see Notre Dame in the Big Ten. Truthfully, you're not going to hear a lot of Notre Dame fans support them joining a conference. I would have no problem with. I understand why they don't do it, but. No, I understand why they don't join a conference because there's more. They don't have to share their money with anyone else, and they're still nationally relevant without being in a conference. But I personally, as a Notre Dame fan, would like to see them in a conference. I'd like to see them in the Big Ten. Absolutely. And there's some weird story that once upon a time Notre Dame wanted in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten wouldn't let them in, and so Notre Dame's kind of like telling them to kick rocks anytime it comes up now, which I think is stupid. I would like. There's so many natural rivalries that exist within the Big Ten. It's a great fit geographically, which obviously geography is out the window now. But you could maintain some of these like USC joining the Big Ten. USC is a yearly rivalry game for Notre Dame. There's just so many reasons why it's a good idea, which is probably why it'll never happen.
Can I just say that I love that what Dave is doing here, because he basically made you go into coach speak mode. You just answered that question the way that hard questions are answered at the top level of coaching, when they don't really give an answer, or they give you those, like when you say, excuse me, a deal. That's a fine, by the way. That was terrible. I am so sorry everybody had to hear that phlegm. That was disgusting. But when you hear a deal with the ACC, that's such official. Did you get that off a PR slip somewhere? Did Notre Dame hand that to you to sound good in front of everybody?
That's what it is. It's stupid. I mean, I think it's silly. In my opinion, like, Notre Dame kind of has the ACC over a barrel. It's really weird. I don't know why the ACC entertains it, truthfully. I guess Notre Dame brings value. That's probably why, right? Because obviously Notre Dame has their NBC deal when they play home games, but when they're on the road in the ACC, then it's on the ACC's TV deal for whatever school they're at. And so there's a lot of value to be had there. So I get that, but at the same time, it's so funny because there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that genuinely believe there's a conspiracy the ACC officials are out to get them, which I don't agree with. I just think that officiating right now, truthfully, across the board is really bad.
Oh, it is bad. Dave will agree with you on that too, because I think what he said this week on PF was, "I'm so glad another game was ended by trash reffing."
Yeah, the officiating is really poor right now. I don't think it has anything to do with there being any sort of agenda at all. I think it's silly when people insinuate that there is an agenda.
It's not QAnon.
So and Jonah, to your point, this might be a year where it would hurt them. Typically, I would say no. They're almost like kind of protected in a way because they don't have not playing in a conference championship game. I think most years is probably a benefit. But a year like this year where there's so many, there's probably honestly like 10 to 12 teams that could legit make the college football playoff right now, the way it appears today. And so you're going to have a lot of one-loss teams. You might even have some two-loss teams that are in the conversation, and it might come down to conference champions that being the deciding factor. So it may actually make a difference this year. And I don't know, man. You're a Detroit guy, right? I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if I want to get in the octagon with the guy that's been a Lions fan for what 30 years or something like that, dude. Like you've been through way more pain than I could ever inflict on you. I have no doubt about that.
You know, on the show this week, I monologued and I said that the Detroit Lions were the best story in the young NFL season because of how bad they had been. So let's not end all of this goodwill by taking a big giant shit all over the Detroit Lions on here because they are a very, very good
Hey,
story.
you know me, buddy. I'm a Motor City Dan Campbell fan through and
I
through.
know. So can we have a moment of silence for a minute here? I'd like to have a moment of silence for Brian Kelly's season. Okay, we don't need to go for that long because honestly, it doesn't matter. We're rejoicing. And it's awesome. Because
Oh, that was weird.
it was really weird. That's because there is something playing over here and I can't stop it. This is just a nightmare, an absolute nightmare tonight. This is what happens when we do it on Wednesday. I'm not usually I'm in rare form today. Anyway, so LSU and Ole Miss have a shootout. Now, it's funny because during crunch time last week, both of us, I believe, picked LSU because we thought it was going to be a typical SEC game and it was going to be low scoring. It was not low scoring. And Ole Miss gets the big win. Lane Kiffin finally gets a big SEC win, something that he can hang his hat on. And afterwards, of course, storming the field takes place. Now, I did send you a great clip of a security guard trying to do his job, Bill Belichick style. And it was just the funniest thing ever because he took out a few people, but essentially he looked like the Giants offensive line from the other night, just letting everybody by.
Dude, I'm like, why are you even like? Honestly, I think he was just trying to fend those people off because he just personally wanted to like try to take somebody out. Because most of those guys they just stand there, right? Like I guarantee you they don't get paid enough to try to prevent a field storming at all. So I just and the best part was, and I'm not like by any means, I'm a big guy, so I'm not taking shots at this guy. But the fact is, this was not like an athletic human being by
No,
any
no, no, no,
by
no, no,
any
no, no.
sense of the word at all.
No.
So which made it more funny, seeing him try to like cut off these college kids that were storming the field. It was absolutely wild. And one of the other funny things that was just as pathetic was in the post game, Brian Kelly actually he was asked about the defense, and he said the defense isn't the problem. He's not worried about the defense. He basically blamed the players and just said, "Well,
Yes.
we got a lot of young
That sounds
players,"
about right.
which that's his MO, man. That's what he's always done. He's never really accepted any responsibility for anything that happens on the field. It's always the kid's fault, and that's frustrating. But it's there's a little bit of, and I told you like I didn't hate Brian Kelly when he's Notre Dame. I don't hate him now. I said he's a good coach, bad person.
Southern too.
But yeah, he is now. Yeah, the guy from what Massachusetts is Southern now, but he yeah, typical mass hole. But anyways,
Can't disagree.
his just his shtick or whatever it is, I don't know what you to call it, but
But
I'm
being a
just not
dickhead is a shtick.
yeah, I guess it is. I'm just not. I'm not a fan of it by any means. And it's a little funny to see, you know, because all these LSU folks were the same people that used to kind of take shots at Notre Dame because of Brian Kelly when he was there. Once he went down there, and Notre Dame fans are like, "Good luck," like,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh no, he's great. He's the winningest coach in your history. What are you talking about?" Which it's a fact, but
Sure.
it's funny to see them now like calling for his head a little bit right now that they're struggling and they're
Oh.
starting to experience some of the same things.
In the South, they are not just going to be coming for his head. They're going to be doing a lot of other stuff. But just give it some time, man. We'll see what happens. You may see Brian Kelly at an HBCU sometime trying to resurrect his career the way Deion Sanders is currently climbing the ladder. But I want to say this. So a lot of footage came out about the storming of the field. Now, I have to admit, boomer alert here. Yes, he is. And I feel like I was not into storming the field as often as it's happening because I think it is devaluing what it actually means to storm the field. And I know I've leaned on, well, it could be dangerous for the players. Now, I think that still is true, but I think some of the footage that came out of this Ole Miss thing has made me rethink this a little bit. Did you see the video of the college kid who went up to one of the LSU players and
Got
said,
knocked
F
out.
LSU? But see, here's the thing. The best part about it was you could freeze frame the exact moment when the fuck it and find out lines converged because he knew he was about to find out. And this is what I'm talking about and I'm like, college kids are stupid. But then I thought, well, why am I going to save them from themselves? Like, if you're going to be that dumb to go up to this giant football player and say something like that, you kind of deserve the smoke that's coming your way. So you know what? Storm the field all you want.
Sure. Like, people have to learn that your actions have consequences. I think we do.
Oh,
We way too much. We try to protect people from consequences. So, in that sense, I have no issue with it. I
God.
I tended to agree with you. I've been a little old man about it for a while. Like, the storming the field. Like, this is not worthy of a field storming. And then I'm trying to think about it like as objectively as possible. And I'm like, you know what? Like, this group of kids that they're college students right now, their kind of formative years through high school, like, 2 of those years solid, like, was during COVID, right? And where they're basically locked in their homes or whatever. There's no fans allowed at sporting events, anything else. And, like, so to see people, like, relishing, I guess, the opportunity just to, like, experience these live sporting events in their fullest form, I don't really have a problem with it when I think about it like that, right? Like, we would have given anything a few years ago, right, to see a field storming. And now we get it every Saturday, right? But it's part of it's just what makes college football really cool is just all the, I don't know, the fact that, the student section, they're very passionate. The fans are passionate, way more passionate than NFL fans. We've talked about that.
Yes.
And so while I think there should be a threshold to for a field storming to be justified, I'm not going to uh, take any shots at anyone who chooses to storm the field. And when I told you that on Saturday, in the midst of Notre Dame being on the ropes, you said, "Well, I sense there's about to be a field storming, so we'll see how you feel about it here in a few
No, I
minutes."
said we will revisit this text in a little bit. If
Yeah.
I said if Duke comes back and there's a field storm, we'll revisit this take. But I just want to point out that you missed an opportunity, a very big opportunity just now. You could have answered and said the only field storming that would be appropriate was when App State beat Michigan in the Big House. You could have taken Dave to the woodshed on that one, and you let him off light.
Well, but it happened in the big house, so there
I'm
were
just
probably
saying.
like 15 App State fans
Hey,
there. I tell you what, that would have made it better though if the 15 App State fans stormed the field.
they would have had to run
Um,
from the very, very top of the Big
yes.
House all the way down. But you know what? It probably would have been worth it. So, last thing about last week is Georgia. I don't want to be the guy who overreacts, but we're now 4 weeks into this thing, and they've played some really tough SEC games. They've marginally squeaked by for the most part. And I said last week that they're getting the nod at number one because in order to be the man, you got to beat the man, right? The way Ric Flair always used to say it. And Auburn does things really, really well, and they just about win. And they don't win though because Bowers is an absolute beast who I'm sure is going to get drafted to the Falcons and never get used because that's just what happens to great tight ends in college, it seems. And is it fair now after 4 games that we can start questioning Georgia because they have a lot of tough games coming up and they're going to have to beat a lot of really good squads? And is the credit that they're getting for being who they have been the last 2 seasons going to start to run out? I think it's a fair question.
It's a fair question. It's a difficult one to answer because I can see both sides of it.
Yeah.
If you just look at it in a vacuum of this season alone, they don't look like the best team in the country. But if you take the last 2 years or even the last 5 years with how they've grown, and you look at the whole body of work, you would say, well, they're the big dog, right? And they're going to get everybody's best shot every week. And like so, we talk about other teams that are in the same boat. They're going to get everybody's best shot every week, and so I'm not surprised when people come out ready to play against them uh, for that reason. So it's tough to say. Last year they struggled a couple times. We've mentioned it before. They struggled against Mizzou, and so we'll see. I think I don't know if you can really start to. They're still winning games, right? They're finding a way to win, and until that doesn't happen, I don't know if we can quite be too critical of them at this point in time.
Yeah, you might be right about that, but I think it's worth at least watching because their schedule's not going to get any easier. Okay. So speaking of the top 10, here's what we got. Not much of a change outside of Notre Dame sneaking into the 10th spot after beating Duke, and obviously after Utah losing last week, but not much of a change up here. All of these teams took care of business. I think, honestly, and this is not because Dave is here, but I said last week that Michigan was kind of like a boa constrictor, and
Yes.
man, did they do that to Nebraska this week. Not that Nebraska was going to put up any more than 7 points anyway, but I think you get the idea. Like, they just smothered them, and this is a team that they're really good. Nobody's really talking about them nationally only because they haven't played like in these giant, massive games that these other teams have played in, right? But they've took care of business 100%. And I think that they're getting stronger as this year goes along. And so when I look at this top 10 right here, that's a team that stands out to me because of how they have played and looked defensively. And Nebraska just had no chance. None.
No, I keep waiting. I mean, really, for all these top teams, I keep waiting for these teams to go out and struggle against a lesser opponent. And a couple of them have, like we just mentioned, Georgia, but Michigan is taking care of business so far, and they're very methodical. There's not a lot of flash to it, which I don't have a problem with. I appreciate kind of that style of football. There's not a lot, it's like death by a thousand cuts, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think play by play, other teams are like, hey, we're hanging in there, right? Like we're hanging in there, but like next thing you know, you look at the scoreboard and it's 21-0,
Yep.
and so it's just it's impressive the way that they go about their business for sure.
Yeah, and some teams get off to a slow start in the first quarter, and then you see it. Like Michigan, a couple of times this year, they've had some struggles, quote unquote, in the first quarter. Like Rutgers jumped out to a 7-0 lead, and then Rutgers never even sniffed inside the red zone after that. So you're going to see those things. And as you said one time, fans overreact. Like every time the defense gives up a touchdown on the first drive, it's like fire the defensive coordinator. And I just think that teams are going to look that way from time to time because they're all human beings. They're all kids that are trying to juggle a lot of things. So. But honestly, still 3 Pac-12 teams in the top 10. It's pretty amazing. That's not going to hold because I think one of those teams is going to lose at some point, and you're going to see a lot of flip-flopping. But I think it's a strong possibility that we could see a Pac-12 team in the playoff. It just depends on sometimes the Pac-12, all those games, like they seem to be losing conference games every year. But I think that one team is motivated to win because it is the last dance for the Pac-12, and I think they want to go out with a bang. So that's what we got currently for the top 10. Now let's get to the Homer Hour where we can talk about our team. So I want to start actually this time with Virginia Tech because, first of all, it's the shorter of the two conversations, but I think for different reasons. So they're traveling to Tallahassee and facing Florida State for the first time in a few years, I feel like. And they're massive underdogs, 24-point underdogs, and they're going to lose this football game. Do not get me wrong. But I think after watching them last week, what I hoped for at the beginning of the season is starting to come to fruition. And whether it's a legitimate injury or not, Grant Wells is no longer the quarterback. I know he was a senior, and that's probably why he got the nod, but they needed to put Kyron Drones in immediately. And Dave has made this argument about quarterbacks in the NFL, but he needed the reps because I think the upside for him was a lot higher than it was going to be for Grant Wells, who we saw all of last year. And through the first couple games, the offense looks stagnant. Drones comes in, it still looks stagnant. But the thing is, this is his first starts as with Virginia Tech. And this last game against Pitt, now Pitt isn't that great, but also this is a team that has traditionally the last 10 years or so been pretty successful against Virginia Tech. And Drones comes in and the offense actually looks good for once, like 38 points. And he accounts for 3 or 4 touchdowns through the air using his feet. That's the kind of dynamicness that he's going to bring to the table. And so I'm excited about what the team is going to look like going forward because I think the more reps that he gets, and I said this to you, they're invaluable. He hopefully is going to continue to build on what he has done. And so while I think Virginia Tech is going to lose this football game, they may even lose by 24 points. What I hope to see is some continued growth in that department. Like if they don't lose by 24 points, I would consider that almost a win against a team that a lot of people are talking about in the national championship discussion.
Yeah, and they're because of the changeover with coaches and they're trying to build something up. They have the luxury of their record is irrelevant at Virginia Tech right now, right? It's about the process. It's about building something, and going out and competing on the road against a team like Florida State would be a big step, right? If they can go and hang in there for a while, hang in there for 3 quarters or whatever. Of course,
Yes.
I think everyone expects, Florida State to come out victorious
Sure.
because, they are the more talented team and all that stuff. But I'm not sold on Florida State either. I wouldn't be surprised if Virginia Tech gives them some trouble. So it's a game that's kind of on my radar, man. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see some growth. I think that that's fair, right? I don't want them to, or I mean, I'd love it if they won, but let's not be too unrealistic. And I think that that's what I'm going to be looking for. And hopefully, what we saw last week is signs of growth, and they can continue to build on it. But Notre Dame continues their gauntlet schedule as they now travel to Louisville, Kentucky. Friends of ours live down there, Mike and Tabby, of course, but they're traveling down there not to face them, but to face the Louisville Cardinals. And Notre Dame is 6.5-point favorites on the road. Louisville is now ranked. Budge is pretty high on how exciting this team is. So how are you feeling about this game going in?
And I won't drone on about Notre Dame too long. We've talked about them a lot. Louisville's a good football team, right? Jeff Brom, the head coach, came down there from Purdue, I believe, and he's a good football coach. He's a great offensive coach, and the quarterback Notre Dame. I think the quarterback's from Virginia, and I may have that backwards, but maybe Brom's from whatever. But Notre Dame faced the quarterback last year. I believe the quarterback was at Virginia, or maybe the quarterback was at Purdue. Hell, I don't know. My dad can chime in; he probably knows, but. Anyways, one or the other.
He was in
And
college somewhere.
sure, but Notre Dame has faced the coach and the quarterback just at different places over the last couple of seasons. So there's not a ton of unfamiliarity. Marcus Freeman was actually on for a brief period of time on staff with Jeff Brom at Purdue before he got the job at Cincinnati. But still, he said there's not a ton of familiarity there either. That aside, this is Notre Dame's third consecutive night game, which presents challenges just schedule-wise, which isn't a big deal. Everybody does it. But it's their seventh consecutive game against an undefeated opponent.
Yep.
And which is worth. Obviously, Navy was week 1, so of course they're undefeated. Tennessee State FCS schools. So I'm not tooting my horn about that by any means, but every time they've taken the field against a team that hasn't lost the game before, and they've delivered the first loss to all of their opponents outside of Ohio State, of course. So it's going to be a test again. Like I said about Georgia, like I've said about Notre Dame a million times, they're going to get their best shot. It's going to be interesting to see how Notre Dame stacks up defensively. This is a kind of a high-powered athletic offense, so. But the defense has been really good so far. I look for that to continue, and I'm hoping to see some growth out of the offense a little bit, right? I think that
Excuse me.
the problem I think that's happening is we're not seeing a lot of good in-game adjustments from the offense, and so hopefully that evolves over time here. You basically have a first-time offensive coordinator, his first time calling his own offense, so. I'm willing to give him, and a lot of people will say this: Notre Dame's not a place where you should be learning on the job. But the situation, the circumstances under which he got hired were unique, to say the least. So I'm willing to let him grow within that position and give him a chance to figure things out. So with that being said, though, Jonah, you have a good question here, and I'm assuming you're talking about the top 25. When there's parentheses by a team's name with a number in it. So what that is that's how many of the writers picked that team as number 1. So Georgia had 35 people pick them as number 1, Michigan 12, Texas 10, and so on. Ohio State obviously came in 4th, but only had one person pick them number 1. Florida State had 4 people vote them as the number 1 team. So that's what those numbers are for. So that's a great question, man, because there's probably a lot of people out there that don't realize that.
It's not Jake the Snake Plumber.
Okay, so yeah, so no, it's not same name, right? Yeah, but he played.
Almost.
So the quarterback was at Cal and Purdue. So he's been around the block a little bit. But either way, Notre Dame's gonna have to come out and play a good football game, man. No ifs, ands, or buts. And third straight solid opponent, and they're going to have another tough one next week. I think that they've played tough enough games week after week that's kind of would have broken them from the the possibility of broken them from the possibility of looking ahead at this point because you got USC next week, but having Ohio State followed by Duke, followed by Louisville, they know they're running the gauntlet right now, so I think that helps. It would probably be worse if a lot of these last few games were lesser opponents because you might get a little complacent. But I always say, man, it's like this is how you sharpen the sword, man. Be tested, have to compete in tough moments, and they're going to get a chance to do that on Saturday.
They sure are. So before we get to the other games that are on the slate, let's talk about the Heisman for the first time. I think now that we're 4 weeks in, we can probably talk a little bit about it. So I went to ESPN.com to see who they had or are tracking for the Heisman. And would you be surprised if the 5 people that they're tracking are all quarterbacks?
No, not at all.
No. So I just want to name them here because we're not going to speculate who's going to win because I think any of these guys could win. But we have Michael Penix Jr., of course, at Washington, who's been playing very, very well. Now, Washington kind of squeaked out a victory over Arizona, which screwed us both for crunch time last week. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So they're a team that is, people are very high on them. And that's obviously because he's very, very talented. Budge told us when we saw him or met him the first time that the guy is all about football. So I think he's going to be in the discussion unless that team completely falls apart. Caleb Williams, of course, probably considered the unanimous number 1 pick if he decides to leave. He had a great game offensively against Colorado, although did make a couple of throws that were very worrisome at one point during that game, or at some points during that game. You got Bo Nix of Oregon, of course. I mean, he just put up really solid stats again against Stanford. Jordan Travis, who we already talked about, Florida State. But here's the one I like. Cam Ward, Washington State, sitting there at number 5 according to ESPN. I like that, man. I like a team like Washington State having a guy in the Heisman discussion for as long as possible because you don't see it too often.
Was Gardner Minshew ever like somewhat in the hunt for it at all when he was there? Because I'm pretty sure he like led the nation in passing.
He did, but I don't think that he was ever in the discussion because the air raid offense is just not seen. Because he was in the air raid. That was when Mike Leach was there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and air raid is just not is seen as like I don't want to call it a compiler sort of system, but you get the idea.
Like if you were running a fullback in an option offense and led the nation in rushing, everyone would be like, well, obviously, because you ran the ball 35 times a game.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of the idea. Yes.
It's no, that's really interesting. It's cool to see Wazoo get one on the board. I think I have a question for you.
Yes.
If Travis Hunter hadn't gotten injured, do you think he would be on this list?
He might be. I mean, well, okay. So I think the answer to that is if Travis Hunter doesn't get hurt, is Shedeur Sanders on this list? Because I think
that's
more likely he's the one that's going to be on this list. That's just my opinion. Who was the last non-QB to win the Heisman? I believe that was Devontae Smith of Alabama.
Yeah, yep. I was thinking, man, I totally forgot about him. I was like looking back to I'm like with Charles Woodson, but he's the last defensive player.
Last defensive player.
Is he the only defensive player to ever win it?
I don't think so. I mean,
I'm sure back in the day,
I was going to say
defensive players would
before they invented the forward pass. I'm sure a bunch of defenders actually got that award. But no, Jonah, that's a good question. And currently, he is lighting it up with Jalen Hurts, who was a teammate of his, I believe, at one point. Yes. Or maybe they just barely overlapped at Alabama. So obviously, Nick Saban has been recruiting himself some good old boys over there because they've had a lot of talent roll through there. And I think the Devontae Smith year was when Mac Jones was quarterback. So amazing that he even got those stats in the first place.
Well, both of them were Heisman finalists.
Yes, they were, and we see what happened with Mac Jones. Well, maybe that's not fair, but you get the idea. By the way, grand slam for the Phillies. It is now 7-0. So I think that the Phillies are going to move on to the next round over the. It
should be
Marlins.
The freaking Cubs, man. They totally pissed it away down the stretch.
The Liberty Bell is ringing. It's 7-0. This game is toast unless the Marlins decide to come back. Okay, so week 6 storyline. So we already talked about Notre Dame and Louisville, and we talked about Georgia just now. So Georgia is hosting Kentucky. A Kentucky team, by the way, last week we said they were going to have a big win over Florida because Florida is a team that can't seem to pull it together 2 weeks in a row.
Florida.
Look what happened. I said they were soft last week because you said, well, maybe you sometimes just can't get the juice unless it's your rival. Stop it. They need to have the juice every single week. Kentucky has the juice, and I like what they have going on, but they travel in between the hedges. It's a big game, in my opinion, for Georgia because I think this is a team now in Kentucky that's coming in. They've, as I said last week, they were kind of seen as a laughingstock in the SEC for a very long time, never really had consistent success. And here they are, and it's signature win time against the two-time defending national champions. And you get the chance to dethrone them and continue on to this season. I think this game is going to be very intriguing to watch.
Yeah. First of all, like Kentucky didn't just like win the game. They pounded. They piss pounded
And they
Florida.
just let off the throttle, and Florida had no firepower to
Oh
come
my
back.
goodness, man. Like they ran the ball down their throats, buddy.
Yes.
Like that was fantastic. Now, this is what I feel like. I feel like Kentucky over the last few years and they've just been clawing, trying to climb the mountain in the SEC. And it seems like they get off to that good start. And it's not like they just like slip. They just get knocked off the damn mountain eventually
Yes.
completely. And so that's why they cannot go into Athens on Saturday and get blown out.
No.
Like, for the sake of the future of their program, like, they have got to go in there and compete and make this a football game, which I think they can do. Um, but again, tough environment, all those other things, but, like, it's the SEC, man. Everywhere you go is crazy.
Just means
So,
more.
yeah, it just means more. And so that shouldn't be an issue. I think that it's just gonna come down to, can you get your players to not get caught up in the moment of that we're
Yes.
playing the big bad Georgia and just go out and execute, right? Execute the game plan, play with a purpose, all those coachy things that you hear coaches say, but that it's really true.
Mhm.
You need to simplify the game into small things and focus on those things. And when you can do that, that's when you can have success. If you go in to a game, Kentucky going in to play Georgia, and you're trying to win the game with the first play of the game, like, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like, you can't win the game on the first play of the game. Like, you just need to focus on executing whatever your assignment is on that play, and then whatever happens, you move on to the next one and move on. Just take it one play at a time, and
God, you really are a coach right
it's
now.
but it's really as simple as that, though. That's why you hear all these coaches say it, because
I know, I know.
it's what you have to do. To be successful in those big time games. You have to sort of diminish the moment and just remind your players, "Hey, this is just another football game." And hopefully Kentucky is doing. I mean, uh, it's Mark Stoops, right? I think that he's been around the block enough. I feel like I hope he has them ready to play. We'll just say that.
That's all that you want to see. But I think the danger is that on the flip side of this, people like myself and other pundits are asking the same question: is Georgia ripe for the pickings? And I think that if I'm Kirby Smart, I'm using that as bulletin board material to be like, we can't let these guys hang around. We need to take them out early and make sure that we make a statement. So this could be a statement game for Georgia. I don't know. I just hope it's competitive, but I think Kentucky has a fighting chance or puncher's chance in this because I think Georgia has had a lot of trouble getting by these teams, and Kentucky may be the most talented team that's come in or that they've seen so far this year. So we will see about that.
Well, and you hit on the head, man. Like, because there's a little bit of a narrative brewing about Georgia right now, and they if they have even if they end up winning this game, but they go down by a score or two early and have to fight their way back to
Yeah.
win, like, it's just gonna extend the narrative. So you're right, Kirby Smart, I'm sure, is using that as bulletin board material and saying like, "Hey, this we have to come out and win in convincing fashion and make a statement to the entire country that we still are the Georgia that everyone thinks we are."
Yes. And speaking of teams that need to continue doing that, Alabama travels to Kyle Field and takes on Jimbo and Texas A&M. So Alabama continues to play well since then. I mean, they made short work of Mississippi State since everybody doubted them. And Texas A&M comes in at 4-1. I think their only loss is to the Miami Hurricanes, right? And this is another game where Nick Saban has a protege on the other side. And traditionally, he's done very, very well against those other coaches, except Sark recently. That's the one that everybody points to. You and I both are not big Jimbo Fisher guys. We both don't trust Texas A&M in games like this. But if Alabama is ready to fall, this is the time for Texas A&M to take advantage. But it's hard to bet against Saban because even though they maybe aren't as talented as they once were, it's still Saban and they're still talented regardless.
So obviously, like Johnny Manziel's freshman year aside, right? Like that I believe also was A&M's first year in the SEC, possibly.
I think so. That
Besides
sounds
that
right.
season, Texas A&M has just sort of existed in the SEC.
Don't tell them that.
They haven't had a lot of statement wins, and this would be that. This would be a statement win that Texas A&M needs, that Jimbo Fisher needs. Like, I don't care if Jimbo Fisher wins this game. I don't know if it matters what happens the rest of the season. Like, just winning this game may help him keep his job. Uh, and because these are the games that people care about. The people that are responsible for keeping you employed care about games like this, beating Nick Saban in Alabama, especially at home. And so I think this is a pivotal game for the future of Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. So I'd be very interested to see how it all plays out. And there you go. And he's right. 2 words, Tommy Reese. Uh, and I think it's kind of funny because what you've seen happen over the last couple of weeks is Alabama has sort of gone back to old school Nick Saban ball, man. Like,
Yep.
it's just great defense, and let's just be really conservative and run the ball on offense. Um, and that's probably partially because I'm just going to say that they've got kind of an inept offensive coordinator, and they haven't been able to have the success offensively that they had when Sark was there and Lane Kiffin and Bill O'Brien. So, I mean, you think about that, man. Think about those names I just said:
I know.
Steve Sarkisian, Bill O'Brien, Lane Kiffin, and now your freaking offensive coordinator is Tommy Reese.
Well, I
It
remember
probably
I
keeps
joked about Robert Saleh. Like, is Saban going to be hiring? Because that's where people go when
to
they
resurrect
fail at
themselves.
they when they fail at one job, they go to Tuscaloosa because something about being next to Saban always seems to make them look better by comparison. But Tommy Reese, I don't know. We may be looking at Alabama at the end of the year. Like, you might be making fun of Tommy Reese right now, but are you going to be making fun of him if this team is in the SEC championship game and has a chance to potentially go to the playoff? You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
if they have to win playing old school Bama football, I don't think Saban really cares.
No, just win, baby, right? And in the
Yes.
words of the late Al Davis, just win, baby. And that is all that matters at the end of the day. And it doesn't, I mean, as much as you'd like to have convincing wins just because the optics are really good, with the way this season's gonna go, like I said, it's gonna be messy, dude. Like, this is gonna
Yes.
be, I think, one of the least clear-cut 4-team playoffs that we've ever seen. And I know we said last year it was gonna be messy and it ended up being, for the most part, pretty cut and dry. But
It could
I
have, well, remember, it almost could have been messy because Kansas State beat TCU in the Big 12 championship game, which we thought
yeah.
was going to throw things into chaos. And they threw TCU in there anyway, which I think we both agreed with at the time. But yeah, we always think that though, because again, we're coming up on week 6. Do we really know anything? But I want to go to a point that you just made about, and I think you're talking about, and of course, Jonah's making it here, right? But I think it is very valid because Dave and I talked about Ohio State. We talked about Ryan Day last week. You and I did. And we both agreed. I think Dave said this too, is that Ryan Day at the end of the Notre Dame game was kind of politicking for his job, right? At the end of the season, in hopes that if they lose to Michigan, say, that this is not something that they hold against him. But I think in certain circumstances, beating certain teams 100% matters. And if Ohio State doesn't win the national championship game this year and they lose to Michigan on the way to doing so, that matters. It matters to the administration. It matters to the fans. It matters to the boosters. Like, everybody wants that game. And it matters so much more. And if Jimbo Fisher can't beat Alabama, then most people are going to look at him and say, then what the hell can you do? Because that's who you got to go through in the SEC right now. Like, that's who has been at the top of the SEC for a long time. So if you can't take out the big guy, then what the hell are you worth?
Well, and then, yeah, you're right. And you could say, well, if you can't beat Alabama this year, how are you gonna beat um, Texas, right? Next year when they're in the SEC. How are you if you can't handle Alabama this year, which appears to be by comparison a slightly down year. And then again, week 6 or whatever, right? So it's really weird saying that because it's almost like the Patriots of, back in the day where everybody'd write them off if they were struggling a little bit, and then here they come, they go in the freaking Super Bowl. So I don't want to write Alabama off yet, like you mentioned, but if you can't beat this Alabama team the way they've looked so far, how how are you going to compete with at the top level of the SEC moving forward? I think that's a very valid argument.
Yes,
And
and by the
Jonah,
way, yes,
the playoffs are expanding to 12 teams starting next season.
next
So
year.
this is the last year of the 14 playoff.
Yes, and look out for Colorado in the expanded playoff, by the way. But by the way, so Coach, I said last week that if I was given 1,000 guesses to name the Mississippi State coach, I would not have come up with, what was it, Zach Arnold? Does that sound right?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, I still don't know, even after having seen it on the screen. So a couple of other games. Washington State traveling to UCLA. Interestingly enough, UCLA is a favorite in this game. Now, I don't trust Chip Kelly in these games, but I understand why the money seems to be going in that direction, because even though Washington State has been playing great, I don't think a lot of people see them as a national title contender, but just more Pac-12 football to watch. And I think that Washington State, if they continue to win games like this, are going to be so exciting as we get closer to conference championship week.
Well, what people don't realize is I believe this is Washington State's first road game.
Yeah, I think so.
They've played every game at home so far. Now, if you're going to play a road game that you would choose, it would be playing UCLA at the Rose Bowl, which is frustrating because their lack of a home field environment is a disgrace to the iconic stadium that is the Rose Bowl. But it's not a difficult place to play a game by any means. Now, but you still have to consider all the things that kind of play into going on the road and stuff like that. Those could be a factor. You're not in that routine yet because you've played at home every week so far. But that's why coaches get paid the big bucks, man. Like, your job is to get your team ready to play no matter what the circumstances are.
100% agree with that. See, I have it on mute so I don't cough into the microphone. In Big 12 and Big 10 land, Maryland and Ohio State. Now, on paper, this looks like a mismatch, but somebody somewhere I saw said that Maryland's going to catch one of these big fish in the Big 10. And I know that Budge was kind of high on them with the Mike Loxley Kool-Aid and all that kind of stuff. And Talia Tungavailoa, I think I said that correctly, or Baby Tua, as a lot of people will colloquially call him, has been having a pretty decent season. But I just think it's going to be difficult to beat Ohio State on the road. But hey, if Maryland's going to be seen as one of the contenders in this conference at some point, or be in the middle of the pack with 8 or 9 wins, they're going to have to take out one of these top 3 teams in Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State at some point.
Yeah, it's similar to Kentucky. I think they just need to go in there and compete to stay in the good graces, right, of people being like, okay, they're moving in the right direction. Like, this is a good football team. They can't go get blown out. And not that there's any shame in getting blown out by Ohio State. They're a very good football team. The Notre Dame fan in me, I want to see Ohio State beat the piss out of everybody to play the rest of the season, because then it makes that close last-second loss look better. Now, granted, Notre Dame have to take care of their business from here on out aside, but at the same time, though, you know me, right? Like, I'm a sucker for the underdog, and especially knocking off the big fish, right? And Ohio State's a big fish, so it's definitely an intriguing matchup.
Yes. Colorado at Arizona State. This is only intriguing for the fact that I want to see how Colorado looks after losing to 2 very superior teams. This would appear to be a get-right game for them, and they're a team that we have adopted somewhat now, so I'd be interested to see how they play, because USC kind of struggled a little bit with Arizona State, and these are the kind of games that they're going to have to win if they want to get to bowl eligibility. So I'll be interested to watch how Coach Prime's troops come out of these last 2 losses with all the hoopla on them, and playing a team that they're probably not going to get a lot of exposure on in terms of this game. So that's what I'll be looking for there.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, get right game, coming off the heels of 2 tough losses, one butt whooping, and then they came back late against USC. What I'm curious about is just how healthy are they right now? I mean, because they've taken some licks, man. Like, they've been banged up. And their rosters their depth chart is thin as it is. So
Yes.
They can't really afford too many injuries and stay playing at the level they need to play at. That being said, I do feel like this is their chance to kind of change the recent narrative and get back in the good graces of fans out there by going out and having a statement win, winning convincingly at Arizona State. And I kind of imagine, and no disrespect to Budge, but going from playing Oregon and USC and then to play Arizona State has to feel like um, having, going 15 rounds with two like UFC champs and then going and fighting like an 8-year-old girl. I just have just the discrepancy between the quality of opponent,
And
I think is significant.
Jonah, just oof, brass knuckles across the temple for Notre Dame fans out there.
Goodness.
That was a
Hey,
little
but
bit
you know
mean.
what? I can't defend it, man. Like there's no defense to it.
No, you're
Um,
right. And the game of the week, the Red River rivalry. James has already picked Oklahoma, but obviously Texas and Oklahoma needs no introduction. These are two teams that hate each other with a passion. They're both coming in ranked in the top 15. Texas is 3, Oklahoma is 12. Venables having a much better sophomore season at the helm in Oklahoma, and Sark obviously has these guys rolling. So I think this has potential to either be an excellent game or a complete flop. Like, I don't think there's any in between. I think it's either going to be amazing or it's just going to suck.
yeah, I hear you. I have a hard time, taking my fandom out of the way I view these games because what I look at is I'm like, all right, which one of these teams is most right for the picking down the stretch? And whoever I think could get knocked off down the road, I would rather them win this game, right? So I would, let's say if I look at Oklahoma's schedule and I'm like, I think that Oklahoma, they've got a few tough games. I don't believe in them. I don't buy into their uh to what they're doing as much as I do Texas. So I'd like to see them win this game because I think they're going to falter somewhere along the way. And then you're going to end up with 2 one-loss teams at the top of the Big 12. It's favorable for Notre Dame. So I always think about it from that perspective. But this is, man, it's a test for Brent Venables. Does he have his Oklahoma? This would be a quick turnaround, man. Like if he, after the way last year went, if he could to win this game and to finish out the season unbeaten and win a Big 12 championship would be one of the more impressive year-over-year turnarounds that we've seen.
Yeah, and remember earlier, I think it was in the preseason, you sent me a TikTok where I think Cowherd said that could Oklahoma become the new Nebraska, where they just become almost irrelevant because they have a defensive head coach. It has been an offensive university, but he has turned them around. And so I think that they have a chance as anybody to win this game. I mean, it's a neutral site game at the Cotton Bowl. There's always a lot of fanfare, and you never know. Now, Texas has won a couple of times recently, but it's been a big upset because Oklahoma has had some legitimate playoff teams. This is not the case this year. They're both coming in a really good spot. I think Texas probably would be considered a little bit better on paper, but we will get to that in crunch time with the spread because it's a little bit larger of a spread than I thought that it actually would be.
Has there been when's the last time, and I am not familiar enough with like the history of this game, but when's the last time that both teams needed this win as bad as both teams need it right now?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think about. I mean, probably when Bob Stoops was back there was what I'm thinking. Maybe when Mac Brown was coaching Texas, like maybe 2009, which is when
Yeah.
I think Texas. Is that when Texas went to the national title game against Alabama, or was that 2012? I can't remember.
Sheesh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody in the chat can help us out with that one because I have way too much shit.
Is that
in my
Colt
head.
McCoy?
Yeah, that was Cole McCoy. Yep. And Garrett Gilbert, I think, had to come in. Does that sound right? Because
Nah,
he
I
got a
don't know.
stinger. Yeah, either way, that started the whole dynasty.
Colt
so.
McCoy is kind of a fragile human being, I feel like.
Who has played a lot of games in the National Football League, way more than any of us have played in the National Football League. So put some respect on that man's name because he's won a ton of NFL games that he has had absolutely zero business winning. Before we get to the next segment, I want to remind everybody, if you are new to this feed, we are taking roll call for colleges. So if you have a school that you root for, went to, whatever, please place it in the chat because we want to make sure to include it in next week's college roll call. Well, buddy, we're getting close to the end. And again, we did not record together this week. So you know what that means. I have no idea if my voice is going to be able to hold out for this because I just got so much phlegm back there. My apologies to everyone in the feed, but it is what it is. When you have kids one day, if you do or don't right now, you will understand exactly what I mean. So crunch time last week, both of us, we struggled a little bit, both under 500. I'm still hovering a little bit over 500 for the season. You need to make up a little bit of ground. And so guess what? We got 10 games this week. Are you ready?
Yeah, a little rough week for both of us last week. Let's get back on the winning side. Iceman, let's fire it up.
All right, we just ended the last segment with this game. The Red River Rivalry. Number 12, Oklahoma, traveling to the Cotton Bowl to face Texas. Texas is a 6.5-point favorite in this game, coming off of a huge win against Kansas. To me, this is going to be a close game because I think both of these teams hate each other. They both need this win, and so that 6.5 points makes me feel a little bit weird. I'm taking Oklahoma because I can see it as a 3-point game.
So I think this is going to be a good football game, but in the end, I just feel like Oklahoma's not quite there yet. I think Texas is the better football team, and I feel okay with laying the 6.5. Hook 'em horns.
Number 23, LSU. God, I hope they lose. At Missouri. Now, LSU is a 6-point favorite on the road. Missouri is ranked number 21, and I don't think they're getting nearly enough respect. Now, Brian Kelly probably went to a lot of families' homes after that loss last week because he knows where you live. But I think Missouri needs to be given a little bit more of a fighting chance. So you know what? It's a home game. Give me Missouri to knock Brian Kelly out of the conversation for good.
Man, I tell you what, I have no analysis about this game whatsoever. This is pure emotion. Missouri on the money line to win.
Number 13, Washington State, traveling to the Rose Bowl, not to play in the Rose Bowl, but to play UCLA. Chip Kelly and UCLA is a 3.5-point favorite at home. As you said, Washington State, this is their first road game. I think that they are going to be tested, but you know what? I'm still rolling with the Cougars, so give me Washington State to cover.
Yeah, I don't have too many concerns about it being the first road game. I think Washington State is the better football team at the end of the day, so I take Wazoo to win.
Number 11, Alabama, traveling to Kyle Field to face Texas A&M. Alabama is only a 2-point favorite on the road. Jimbo Fisher does not have a good track record in beating Nick Saban. I feel like I'm going to regret this, but I think Texas A&M is going to give them a game and give me Texas A&M to win outright.
Iceman, we're seeing eye to eye. I feel good about this Texas A&M team. Is weird because we were really critical of them last year, but I think Jimbo and the boys get her done. Give me the Aggies.
Number 20, Kentucky, travels to number 1, Georgia. Georgia is a 14.5-point favorite at home. They have struggled to beat some of these SEC squads. Kentucky comes in with a ton of momentum after a big win against Florida. Georgia has the narrative that they can't get it done and maybe that they are ready for an upset. I'm feeling it right now. Give me the Wildcats to not win, but to definitely score or get closer than 14.5.
All right, so, man, I really want to. I want to take Kentucky to cover the spread, but I feel like Kirby's going to have the guys ready to go. Georgia is going to come out and make a statement, so I'm going to take the Bulldogs. I'm going to take the Bulldogs to cover the 14.5 between the hedges.
Number 10, Notre Dame, traveling to Louisville to face number 25, Louisville. Notre Dame is a 6.5-point favorite coming into this game. They have had some close calls lately. Obviously, they're a little bit banged up. Louisville is going to be looking for that signature win, but you know what? I'm going to roll with the Tide here. Give me the Tide to cover.
You know, I think that Louisville has not played a team that has been on the level of Notre Dame or anywhere close to it up to this point. Notre Dame's battle-tested, and I think similar to Georgia, they got to come out and make a statement and let the nation know that they're a serious contender. So I'm going to take the Irish to cover the 6.5.
Number 24, Fresno State, traveling to Wyoming. This is a Mountain West showdown where Fresno State is a 6.5-point favorite. The only reason I have this game on here is because last year we had dreams of Air Force making the college football playoff, and they traveled to Wyoming and got their dreams dashed. And you know what? I think the same thing is going to be happening to Fresno. Give me the Cowboys.
Well, I mean, Texas struggled at Wyoming, right, or against Wyoming at home. That they're a solid football team, but I think Fresno State is for real, man. Like, they're a really good football team. They got the green V on the helmet. I don't know the story behind that, but I don't know. I feel like they're going to draw some power from it, and they're going to get this W and cover the spread.
Switching to the NFL for 3 games, the Jacksonville Jaguars stay in England and host the Buffalo Bills, who are traveling overseas. The Bills are 5.5-point favorites going into England. They just kicked the absolute shit out of the Miami Dolphins. The Jags have looked a little bit weird this year, but I think the travel could make this a closer game, but give me the Bills to cover.
Yeah, the Jags are at their home away from home. It'll be interesting to see if them staying there all week has any impact on the game, if the travel impacts the Bills. But my goodness, the Bills looked really, really good. Like you said, I feel like the Jags lack a little bit of an identity right now. So I am going to take the Bills to cover the 5.5.
Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles travel to Los Angeles to face Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. The Eagles come into this game a 4.5-point favorite. The Rams have a good young nucleus of receivers. Matt Stafford knows how to throw to them at this point. I think the Eagles, though, just have a little bit too much swagger, a little bit too much talent, and I think the Eagles are going to win. So give me the Eagles, giving 4.5.
Man, the Eagles just squeaked one out in overtime against the Commanders in kind of unimpressive fashion. They got to travel across the country to take on Sean McVay and the Rams. I think the Eagles win, but I'm going to take the Rams to cover that 4.5.
And last, the Dallas Cowboys travel to San Francisco to face Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are 4-point favorites at home on Sunday night. This is a litmus test for the Dallas Cowboys. They looked awesome against the New England Patriots, but they are facing a big boy team with a lot of big boy talent. I love the 49ers. I love Brock Purdy. Give me the 49ers, given 4.
This is the game of the year so far in the NFL, in my opinion. Two really, really good football teams. And let's go, buddy, right? This is a 90s throwback classic game. Cowboys against the 49ers. That being said, I think it's a really, really close game. I'm so conflicted. I tell you what, this is what I'm going to do. Cowboys +4. Cowboys +4.
All right, and that is the end of Crunch Time. Hopefully you can have a better week and get closer to 500. I hope that I go 8-4 again, or 6-4, whatever the hell it is. Who cares? But all I know is that I have a great time doing it. Not as many good NFL games this week, my man. It's a little bit weak in the NFL front, but we always have a lot of good college games to go back on. So always a good time to do Crunch Time. And let's see how it goes. I like that we're tracking the records, though, because let me tell you, adding the spread, this shit ain't easy.
No, it makes it tough, man. Really tough. We need to get a graphic to put James's record up too at some point in time. I think it'd be great.
He is 3-1 so far.
Yeah, I mean, heck, he's doing better than both of us. And I think that looking at the NFL, it's funny we say. I think there's just not a lot of intriguing matchups, but the parity in the NFL is so good that these games that don't appear to be close games on paper will still probably be close games. There will be a few upsets, and that's one of the best things about the NFL.
And that sound means it is time for Coach's Pick of the Week. You have been blessing this live feed with a lot of picks this week. I don't know if anybody's actually taking your advice. However, you are on a certifiable heater, a 5-game win streak as Boomer Sooner, the Oklahoma Sooners, took care of business against Matt Campbell, soon to be fired, Matt Campbell, and Iowa State, So your record is now 7-12. Somehow you still have some ground to gain, and this is the time to do it. So, Coach, please, as always, bless us with a picketh of the week.
Hear ye, hear ye. Welcome, college football fans. We are on 5 in a row, and I do feel like it's worth mentioning that 12 of those losses are on non-football things. They were on weird stuff like hockey series and international soccer. I think
NASCAR.
at one point in time, NASCAR. So we are on a 5-game winning streak, and I look forward to continue this week. We are setting our sights on Chapel Hill, North Carolina. The Syracuse Orange travel to take on the Tar Heels. Syracuse coming off a tough loss to Clemson last week. There was a lot of hype going into that game. I think everyone expected Syracuse to make a game of it, if not even possibly win, and Clemson won in pretty much convincing fashion. How does Syracuse bounce back from that kind of a loss? North Carolina's got things rolling. They look really good right now, much better than I expected, and I expect that to continue, which is why I am taking the North Carolina Tar Heels to cover the 8-point spread against Syracuse on Saturday.
Wow. The North Carolina Tar Heels with, as Budge put it, their Swiss cheese defense against the Syracuse Orangemen covering the 8 points. Well, Coach, I'm rooting for you to continue winning because I think it's something that you deserve for how absolutely terrible you were at the beginning of this year. So let's all hope for the best. So let it be written, as always, so let it be done. And it is time now to end this feed. A rare Wednesday night. Nothing went right tonight. I mean, the way that this show started, it was abysmal. But you know what? It's hilarious. This is what happens when you do live television. And it's something I'm going to laugh about. Like, I can't wait to kind of go back and watch this again because it was great. It was hilarious.
No, I have no issues with it at all whatsoever. It's just it's very it's our nature, right? It's just who we are. We're very original and we are who we are. And we people that watch us and pay attention know that 99% of the time, we're really on top of things as far as the production, thanks to you and the product that gets presented. So it is. It's really funny when we do have little hiccups because we make a really strong effort. You make a really strong effort to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's kind of comical when we end up in those situations. It's fun to watch you sweat a little bit.
Well, it
Uh,
was comical because during the intro logo, all of a sudden I heard this click and all the sound went off. And I thought, well, that's odd. I wonder what happened with that. Like maybe the video just didn't work. And then it dawned on me the second it faded into us that I don't think I have any audio. And I didn't have any audio. And I don't know what happened. I have literally no clue what happened. But hey, it is what it is. And this is what I mean, just for everybody who's watching who's never seen us before, we're producing this from our homes. Like this is not some fancy studio that we are at. Despite this whole thing back here, this is my attic. Right behind me over here is a shit ton of boxes, mostly shoe boxes, but it is a shit ton of boxes. So this
yeah,
is what we do in our
I'm
in
in
our
the
spare
basement.
time.
There's a Paw Patrol tower 5 feet in front of
Oh,
me.
hell yeah.
A Princess Castle over there. I mean, there's toys wherever. I mean, it's this is very small time production that we put out that looks really good. Is really it
For
sounds
now.
good.
For now, this is
Sure.
small time, but we have a great time doing it, and we just hope that we hope we entertain. We're not
Yeah.
here to break any news or give you some type of analysis that you probably can't get anywhere else. We love to watch college football. We love to talk to each other about sports, and we like to share ourselves, our family, and our friendship on these live feeds. And I think that we accomplish that every week, whether the technology works or not.
Oh, 100%, man, and it was great having, uh, it was great having the fans, the folks in here. Yeah, I mean, I'm about 20 to 30 feet away from, where my father is, um, in his bedroom here. He lives with us for those
Ooh,
of you aren't aware of
baby.
that. So, yeah, so maybe one of these days, maybe we'll let him hop on and say a few words. But no, thank
A
you to
few.
Jonah. Jonah, yeah, a few. Yeah, he's not. Yeah, it will be more than a few, I'm sure. But yeah, so thanks to my dad and Jonah, Dave for interacting in the chat. Those of you out there who also listened, feel free to hop in and give your thoughts at some point in time. Maybe next time throughout your school, we'll add it to the roll call list. I saw
Yes.
Jonah's trying to make a case to get the tide on the list.
Oh, I
So
hear it.
I tell you what, this is what I hope happens. All right. I hope that we're going to put them on the list and they're going to lose on Saturday. So it'll be just fun to unveil them being on
It's going to
the
be a
roll call.
test of his fandom. Is he going to jump ship and want to pick another team the first time that they lose? See, that's the sign of a true fan. Is do you jump ship at the first sign of adversity? That's what the test is going to be, Jonah. We're watching you, my man.
He'll
We
be
are
in here next
watching
week.
you.
He'll be in here next week posting War Eagle.
Oh, just goes down the line of every rival. That's fantastic. Well, everybody, I've had a great time. Coach has had a great time. It's Wednesday. We're going to re-air this Saturday morning during college game day. I'm going to be out of town in Connecticut visiting some family. And so on Friday night, we will miss you, but we are glad that you tuned in this week. Coach, it was awesome to see you, to Rick, to Jonah, to Dave, and everybody else. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and I hope this finds you well and safe. You know what? This is College Kickoff Eve.